I'd like to talk about anxiety. Sometimes grief can lead to anxiety, prolonged anxiety, some of my experiences of that. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Ghazala at the Heart and Soul Cafe. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back again. And if you're here for the first time, you're more than welcome. Pull up a chair, come and sit down, and let's have a chat about anxiety. So, what is anxiety? It's actually an irrational fear of something that may or may not happen in the future. Okay? So you're fearful of that. And what you're feeling are symptoms currently, now. You're feeling those symptoms now for something that may happen or may not happen in the future. Sounds really odd, doesn't it? But that's basically what it is. And I could give you an example of that. My daughter, who's my younger daughter, she's a qualified pharmacist, so she studied hard for 5 years. And every year, and this happened before she was actually at university, it was when she was at school as well, doing her GCSEs and A-levels. It was the same thing every year. She was fearful about failing. And I said to her, look, how many times have you failed in the past? And she said, never. And I said, well, there you go. There you go then. If you've never ever failed at an exam in your life, then what are the chances, if you really think about what are the chances then of you failing now? So it is very irrational. It's very irrational. When I first started doing my delivery in mental health first aid, the thing that I was frightened about, and you'll almost laugh, it was, tripping over one of the wires, having, my laptop connected and lots of other things connected up, and tripping over something, and everyone laughing at me. That was my fear. It never happened. It never happened at all. It's never happened over the 6-7 years I've been doing it. So, it might happen. And I think if it happened now, I'd probably just be the one laughing the loudest, and that would be it. It wouldn't be anything about, me feeling embarrassed or anything like that, because these things happen to people. Sometimes we do trip and fall, and it's okay. You can't edit it, can you, if you're face to face? So there it is. So it's an irrational fear of something that may or may not happen, and usually we know that it probably won't happen. So there's lots of different kinds of anxiety disorders. So, I can list a few for you. We could talk about GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder. I'm not going to run down as to what each one of them are, but I will probably in future videos sort of, focus in on one specific anxiety disorder. I think that would be a good way to do it. There's specific phobias, and there's panic disorder, so panic attacks possibly there, agoraphobia, there's situational anxiety, there's separational anxiety, selective mutism, and so there's quite a lot. There's obviously OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, which I've talked about a little bit, and I'll probably go into doing more videos about that. PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. I've done a video about that, and I'll probably do some more work on that, covering more aspects of that. So yes, there's lots of anxiety disorders, and the chances of someone having more than one anxiety disorder is quite prevalent. We don't usually have just one anxiety disorder. Usually one leads to the other, leads to the next, leads to the next. PTSD and OCD are very much seen together. So we see that a lot. Someone who is diagnosed with PTSD might later on develop OCD as well, and that's something that we just see. All right. So there's lots of different anxiety disorders. So what's my experience? Well, my experience is, very sadly, I lost my son 4 years ago, and some of you already know that, and some of you may be hearing that for the first time. And where does that leave you? Well, that leaves you with a lot of anxiety, yes. So you're going through those 5 stages of grief, and I added 2 on, and I've done that in a video. I've gone over that in a video, so please do have a look at that. So I'm not going to go in through the 5 stages, but I'm going to talk about the anxiety and how it affects you and how it affected me. So my son very sadly had a cardiac arrest. He was 22. We were in our local park. He and I were going for our morning walk, something that we did every morning. And that particular day, on the 14th of April, 2021, he very sadly went into cardiac arrest, and he very sadly passed away. I lost my son that day. So what happens is, you, as a parent, you go into this fear, and you can maybe even say, well, it might not even be that irrational, because the first thing was, well, he passed away from a cardiac arrest. He had a heart. He was diagnosed 6 months prior to that with a heart condition. So the first thing was, does anyone else in the family have it? Is it something that was hereditary? Has it been passed down from myself or my husband? And those were the things that we went into. And you can say, well, that's not irrational, that's completely rational. Yes, it was. So we went through those checks, and we found out that it wasn't genetic, it wasn't passed down from anyone else, thankfully. And it wasn't something that, our daughters, we have 2 daughters, that they were possibly going to, go down that same road. So it's not something that we will hopefully see going forward. So that's good. But having said that, you still have that fear of, what if something very similar happens to another one of your children? And those fears start becoming a little bit more from rational to irrational, where you are overthinking, over worrying about things that probably won't happen. But you might think, and you might argue, and please comment below, if you feel that you might sort of think, well, I really don't blame you for that. I don't blame you for being overly worried or cautious, or, about your other children if you've lost a child. And, okay, yeah, I get that, yes. But sometimes they can be quite irrational thoughts. I have people that I've known who, so I counsel women who have lost children and experienced that. And I have in the past had clients where they've lost a child to a certain, let's say, a blood disorder, a rare blood disorder. And after losing their oldest child to that, they've gone on to, the younger child has been diagnosed with the same thing. And you can say, well, that's completely rational, where that person then would feel fearful. So there's always these situations where that anxiety, that worry is justified. It's completely justified. And the parents are probably completely in the right by being worried, so that they can hopefully put things into place. And when it comes to this particular person that I'm talking about, thankfully, the second child, because it was picked up a lot quicker, this rare blood condition that the eldest child passed away from, because it was picked up so early on in the second child, they've hopefully put things into place quick enough to so that child will hopefully go on to having a very bright future. And let's hope that happens for them. But then again, in certain situations, it's not so much like that. It's really having that irrational fear, and that's something that's set in as a result of things that have happened. And sometimes you find that there hasn't been a stress event, there hasn't been this overwhelming event that's happened in somebody's life, but they still are having these irrational fears and thoughts about the future. And that's really when it starts becoming a little bit problematic moving forward, because that then interferes with your day-to-day life, your thinking, your relationships, and things you need to do, and things, so it does sort of start, intruding in your life, and that then can become a problem for you. Okay, so there's various things that we can put into place if someone is experiencing prolonged anxiety. So when it came to my anxiety, it was short-lived. It wasn't something that was going on and on and on, where I actually felt that I needed some kind of medication or other professional help, to help me overcome or manage those anxiety levels. It never really came to that. It was something that subsided a little bit, sort of after 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I started feeling sort of better about that and felt more in control, more sort of aware of what's going on and how my body's reacting to certain things, and I could probably be a little bit more more rational and more, put things into place and say, well, this is probably why it's happening. I'm thinking of a word, but it's not coming into my head right now. So that can happen. For others, sometimes it can be that it gets to a place where those anxiety symptoms do start taking over, do start intruding to an extent where that person is really, really struggling to go on and to function. And if that is the case, then that might be where someone might suggest, or you might think for yourself, that I think I need something a little bit more than just the everyday things that I'm going to cover with you to deal with anxiety. It might mean that you need medication, perhaps. And depression and anxiety usually do go hand in hand. So it might be antidepressants that person may need, which are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So it might be something that's needed, and they do help. They do help, a lot of people. They don't help everyone, but they do help a lot of people. So it might help to bring you to a place where you can then think more rationally and start putting things into place to help with your anxiety levels. So it might be something that you can do for hopefully a short space of time. Then there's other things like counselling and CBT or EMDR. So there's lots of therapies, different kind of therapies, and it's a matter of finding what hopefully works for you, and following that and carrying those things through to an extent where you hopefully start feeling better. So that's something that you could do. Other than that, there's the things that we can put into place for ourselves, and that again comes down to mindfulness and having those moments where you try and calm your mind, and try and put those thoughts to one side for a while and just think about yourself. And again, there's lots and lots of apps, free apps that you can actually download onto your phone, from Headspace or Calm or Mind. So there's lots of things that you can sort of access and have on your phone and practice things like the 5 senses, which I've covered in another video. I could cover that now, but it's just basically when you sit in a room and you sort of think about 5 things that you can see that you've not noticed before, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And you sort of have deep breaths in between that, and just really focusing. While you're focusing on those things around you, you're not probably expending energy on ruminating negative thoughts, perhaps, and that's a good thing. So it's really a matter of practicing those things. You do get better at them as you practice. Meditation, breathing, breath work. Again, I've shared some of those things with you in the previous videos. So there's certain things that you can try there. So it's finding what it is that really helps you, and something that helps you doesn't necessarily help the next person, and something that helps that person doesn't necessarily help the person sat next to them. So it really is trying different things and trying to put things into place to see what really does help you. So that's some of the things that I wanted to cover with you when it came to anxiety. Again, I probably will, as I say, there's so many different anxiety disorders, and we can look at different anxiety disorders as we go on. But for now, I really wanted to focus in on how grief can lead to anxiety, and yes, it absolutely can, but it depends on the severity of it and the frequency of it, on the symptoms. So the more symptoms that you have for a longer period of time mean that those symptoms become a little bit more established, which then maybe fit into a diagnostic criteria of anxiety. Okay, so that might be where you actually receive a diagnosis of anxiety, whereas otherwise we do say, well, I'm feeling really anxious, and you think, okay, well, what is it that's making me feel anxious? You might sort of think that and put things into place to help with that. And other times you need that professional help. All right. So thank you for listening. I hope this video was of help to you. And if it was, please do give like and do comment as well. So let's start up a conversation about this. And if you feel that this video maybe can possibly help somebody else who's going through grief, who you think is experiencing, these symptoms that I'm talking about, that I've sort of spoken about in this video, please do share the video. Again, my goal is to build a community here with this channel where we've got each other's back, where we can sort of check in on others, and sometimes when we're having a bad day or we're struggling, to say, hey, this is what's going on with me, and someone else just stepping in and saying the right things at the right time. And that is really, really what I would like to do. And it's really for that person maybe who sat at home lonely, absolutely alone, after loss, and is actually grieving on their own. And it's, hey, I'm reaching out to you. And I know it's difficult when you're in that place, but if you just make that first move, take that first step, and just reach out and say, I think I need some help. You don't know where it might lead, and you might just start feeling so much better. So please do that. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, please take care of yourselves, and please come back to the Heart and Soul Cafe. Right? So bless your hearts and souls. Thank you.